television, tablets, smartphones, computers provide some instruction. They will never, or let me say, I cannot envision a world where they will ever be as good as adult-child interaction. The reality is so much more happens in reading than the story.
Reading with a young child can boost their school readiness, help them become better readers, and increase their vocabulary. In addition, books with diverse characters help them learn about the world. And stories often help them understand, talk about, and deal with handling new experiences and stressful situations. March is National Reading Awareness Month, and a K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist encourages parents and adult caregivers to spend at least 15 minutes a day reading with young children. On today's Sound Living, the benefits of reading with children. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Bradford Wiles, who is also an assistant professor in the School of Family Studies and Human Services at Kansas State, remembers his parents reading to him and his brothers. However, there's a difference between reading to a child and reading with the child. Wiles says that reading to a child ends up being a one-sided activity.
The adult, in this case my mom or my dad, they both did read to us, rarely together, but they would essentially sit facing us and read to us. So it was a verbatim reading of the text. They might show us some pictures, but it was with the book facing away from them and holding it up for us to look at, whereas reading with children or a child is a much more bidirectional, much more engaged type of approach. Yes, in the first way of reading to, you're both there, but it's unidirectional. There's only one way. It's from the parent to the child. When you read with, it's performing the activity of reading together. Don't get me wrong, 3-year-olds don't know how to read, but it's still the activity is with. It's talking about what's going on in the book. It's talking about things that have gone on outside of the book and how they relate to things going on in the book. It's giving children an opportunity to make silly noises. And, by the way, for adults to make silly noises and to have a shared experience that is not that classic top-down approach to it. That's the biggest difference. If you read to, there's a benefit. But when you read with, that benefit is multiplied hundreds of times over.
You're saying that parents can actually kind of get into these stories and they can kind of make silly voices and do the things that you sometimes see in the movies.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if I know nothing else about child development or even human development, it's that we as people learn when we are interested and engaged. And one of the ways that you can get children interested and engaged is to spice it up, to make the voice of the owl sound like an owl. Hoo hoo, right? Oh, I'm an owl, right? Or, a cow, moo, or, and that's just the children's books. But you can make the sound of the wind. Whoosh, you can, these things that are really elementary for us as adults, but for children, it's really different and exciting, and especially fun for adults to be able to connect with their children on their children's level. We, as adults, sometimes, and I've seen it so many times, Jeff, that we're almost afraid to be silly with our kids. And yet that's what is so good for them. You can be silly and teach them at the same time. It's a tremendous combination. And if you're reading in a way that simply that you want to teach your child how to read, well, the best way to do that is to do it with some gusto and do it with something that's fun, because that's creating a situation where reading is fun, and it's fun for you and for them. And so that when it gets to the point where they're really starting to try to read, they have this family culture of reading being important and fun, and that's a tremendous motivator for them to learn how to do it.
And there is a difference between learning from television and tablets and learning from your parents.
Right. And the reality is those modalities, television, tablets, smartphones, computers, provide some instruction. They will never, or let me say, I cannot envision a world where they will ever be as good as adult-child interaction. The reality is so much more happens in reading than the story. The story is almost secondary. So much of what children are learning about their worlds happens in the context of those shared interactions, right? So if you think about it, you're not just learning about the characters in this book, right? You're learning about how mom or dad or grandma or grandpa talks to you, treats you, what to expect in these things. You and I know what to expect. Heck, we do these things all the time. And I know what to expect. I know I'm supposed to talk about an area that I have some expertise in. You're going to ask me some questions that are open-ended, and I'm going to try to respond to those. We have that shared understanding. We don't have to talk through that every time. But for children, they don't have that. They need to have these experiences to figure out what to expect. So this reading opportunity gives you that. It gives an opportunity to practice with emotions. A lot of books have all different kinds of things that make people sad, happy, mad. One of the best things is it provides perspective taking. Characters in a book offer a very natural opportunity to take another person's perspective without it being threatening. Right? It's not in a moment where, say, they're trying to take a toy from another child and the teacher or adult saying, now, how do you think that child feels? And that's a threatening component. In a book, you can ask that same question and there's no threat to it at all, right? So they get to practice these things. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the book is a jumping off point for the larger lessons of what it is to be a child and an adult in our world.
This is also kind of a learning experience for the parents, too, because the children are going to ask questions that we would never think would come from the story that we're reading.
Absolutely. It's the best part of reading with children, the things that they bring in from seemingly nowhere. But there is some thread. There is. And sometimes you know what it is and sometimes you don't. But it's by far my favorite part of reading with children, and that is the questions that they ask might be related to something that they experienced a year ago and have sat on, and you've not seen any evidence of it whatsoever, and then suddenly it emerges. You know, you're reading a book about Elmo as the main character, and then suddenly a child will start talking about seeing Elmo on ice, and you're like, Elmo on ice? Oh, yeah. I took him to Elmo on ice 8 months ago, and you forgot, but they didn't. But they haven't talked about it at all until then. And that's the reality, is that they bring these things in that are their way of making sense of things. And that's what books do. What books do for us, that shared reading activity helps children make sense of their worlds. I mean, it is such a tremendous opportunity for adults to learn about the way their kids think. And that's really what you're getting at, is it's such a great chance for parents to, again, in a really safe, natural, non-threatening kind of place, learn about their kids, because their kids are going to be really authentic in that space. Again, it's non-threatening. You don't have anything else to do. You know, I know a lot of parents like to read at bedtime and bedtime only. The issue with that, of course, is that you're trying to get kids in bed. And so there's sort of this looming timeline. That's not to say that you shouldn't read to kids before bed. I encourage that, no problem. If you do it at other times, you have even more freedom because you don't have any looming deadline. You have nothing else to do but just spend this quality time having fun, learning about all different things. And it's just a great space to engage with your child.
And depending on their age, you can read a lot of books in 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I would even say that it's not even getting through the books. It's spend 15 minutes, and you can spend 15 minutes on 4 pages. It doesn't matter how many pages you get through. Now, for some kids, it will matter. So what I tell parents is spend as much time on as few pages as you need, and then when you need to finish the book, you read it and close it, right? But here's the thing. For you and me, we read the story for the plot. For very young kids, they don't even understand what that is. They certainly don't understand the continuity between each page and the overall theme of the book. And moreover, every time they read it, it's something different. Something else is new, which is why they read the same book 1,000 times. One of the reasons. The other reason is they get a sense of mastery. You know, you and I, when we read a book, we have mastery. We have read that book. But for young children, they first don't really know how to read yet. And so it takes them a long time to feel like they have some mastery. And one way to do that is to keep having the book read to them over and over and over again, because then they can actually master it. They might not be able to read the words, but they know what's happening on that page. And if you've ever read a book with a child and you've either skipped a page or read the words on the page that weren't exactly what you've read the 50 times before, they know it. And they'll stop you and tell you. And it's because they're developing that sense of mastery. And what better place to develop that than in the context of reading? I mean, it's, again, if I had one thing that I could point to in young children that I would say is the determining factor for academic success, I would say, can they read or can they not at an age-appropriate level? If your child is struggling but is a typically developing child, I should say, there are learning disabilities where children fall outside of this realm and they will need very specific and targeted intervention and prevention efforts. But by and large, children who are read with in their homes will perform very, very well on tests of literacy, regardless of any other factor. That really they're being read to. And in fact, we've gotten to the point now where we just measure the number of books that children have in the home because it's a perfect proxy for how often they're read with. And I can't emphasize enough how crucial just this one thing of reading with children is for their entire development, not just academically and not just in their adult-child relationship, but think about all the things that you have to do in problem solving, right? You have to take somebody else's perspective. You need to be able to look at all the different factors that are going on. Well, what a book does is it presents all these different factors in a way that's accessible. And not every book is about problem solving. I don't expect that, although many of them are. And then the other thing that you get in especially children's books is almost all of them rhyme. So you're learning about language. You're learning about the same sounds and about rhythm and about meter and how you can make different words fit with others. And then I think you can understand in lots of parents' experiences, children will start making up their own silly words, right? Well, that's perfect. You want them to do that because that's part of them experimenting with their language. And the more you expose them to different words, the larger their vocabulary will be. And how do you expose them to different words? Read books with them.
And you don't have to buy all the books. There's a lot of places you can just get books.
Right. So the first thing I would say is please contact your local library. If they can't give you books, you certainly can borrow them if you have an issue with a book that hasn't been paid for or you've lost. They will work with you. If they can't or won't, please contact your local extension office, and they will do everything they can to get you books and work with the library to get that situation resolved and provide all sorts of programming opportunities for you and your family. We have some very good emergent literacy programs in extension because we know how important reading is for young children.
And hit garage sales, because I know that's one of the things we always do. If somebody comes in and they've got a young child, we will give them a book or two or three because we've outgrown them.
Yeah, we have books in our house that have been given to my daughter when we've been out at garage sales just by virtue of being there. But truly, children's books don't hold their value that well anyway. And so if you can't afford a child's book, please contact your local library. There are plenty of resources out there to get books in your child's hands and in your hands to read with your child. It's not a matter of the book being the barrier. It's really the adult's time and interest that are the things that we have the hardest time with.
That's Bradford Wiles, a child development specialist with K-State Research and Extension. He has an extension publication, Emergent Literacy, helping young children's development through reading. It's available through county and district extension offices and through the KSRE bookstore at www.bookstore.ksre.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.